Traffic and Safety Commission on February 27th. If we could have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Javandel?
Present.
Commissioner Jordan?
Present.
Commissioner McCroskey?
Present.
Commissioner Del Rosario?
Present.
Chair Paulson?
Present. So the first item will be public comment. This is for people who would like to address the commission on items that are not on the agenda. We would ask that you limit your discussion to 3 minutes and please fill out a speaker card. I think there are people who would, okay. If you want to do the speaker card afterwards, that's fine too. Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Julia Chang-Frank, and you might remember me from a few years ago when we came to speak about the four-way stop at Washington and Cornell, and I want to thank you all, because I think actually all of you are aware of it. Even if you weren't all commissioners, you supported that effort in some way, so I really appreciate it, and it's completely changed that intersection. It's really been a great benefit for our community, and I can't thank you enough for that, so appreciate that. We did want to sort of give a little background. I know Justin, you weren't here at the time because we worked with the LADA, but so I don't know how much background you have, but in my 3 minutes, I just wanted to give a sort of background that the reason that that stop sign was sort of allowed was that there was some city documents that showed that there was justification for that stop sign to exist from past documents. But anyway, so the warrants happened and that all was approved, and I just wanted to give a sort of description of the motion that carried that evening, which was, I think, made by Commissioner Chomsky at the time, which was to approve a four-way stop at Washington and Carmel with temporary warnings, red curbs, and when possible, install 2 high-visibility crosswalks on Washington Avenue, 2 standard crosswalks on Carmel Avenue, and explore improved lighting and pruning. And I guess within the next capital improvement plan, sidewalk or curb ramp project, you could include crosswalks unanimously approved by the commission. So that was back in, I think, 2016, and is that right? And Michelle's going to provide some more updates of what's happened since then, so thank you.
Hi, my name is, excuse me, my name is Michelle Ling, and so thank you again for, your assistance over 3 years ago. So as Juliet described, that was at the Traffic and Safety Commission meeting on September 2016. And so it was in May 2017 when we actually did finally, get those four-way stop signs installed at the intersection of Washington and Carmel. And it has been a great improvement for our neighborhood. Since then, about 1 month later, about June 2017, we had been exchanging messages with LADA as well as with Public Works. We were trying to figure out when phase 2 would be, which is the curb improvements as well as the crosswalks. And so in June 2017, through an exchange with Mark Hurley, he indicated that our Washington and Carmel intersection had been added to the pavement planning effort that they're working on. And so for about a year, we went back and forth trying to figure out, okay, what does that mean? When is it going to happen? And so in September 2018, I had actually then reached out to Justin Freed, and he had indicated that the crosswalk, the associated curb ramp, and the drainage has been added to the list of approved traffic calming measures. And so that was September 2018, and we're really trying to get an update on when can we expect the crosswalk as well as the curb improvements. And since I'm up here, I know one of the topics on the agenda is regarding the sugar tax. So I sent an email to the commission in support of using some of that revenue to pay for crossing guards. My kids go to Marin, and I allow them to cross at Santa Fe and Marin intersection because there is, in fact, crossing guards at that intersection. I've noticed when there aren't crossing guards, there are lots of drivers behaving badly. They try to run a yellow light, they make right turns on red, even though clearly the sign says not to. And so I think having the crossing guards there is very effective. And, there's lots of kids walking, they're biking, they're scooting. And so, yes, I'm in support of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other public comments? Doesn't look like it, so we'll go ahead and close public comments and move on to item 3-1, monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Thank you, Chair Paulson. For the month of January, there was one reported pedestrian vehicle collision. There were 0 bicycle collisions. There were 10 vehicle collisions reported, one of which was an injury collision. The police department reported issuing 57 moving citations and making 4 DUI arrests. That concludes the presentation.
Are there any commissioner comments, questions?
Thank you.
No? Any public comments? Doesn't look like it. Okay. We'll go ahead and move on then to item 3-2, shared mobility data.
Thank you. So this chart is changing a little from the last month as we transition to the new reporting that we get from GIG. So I've started doing the trip starts and trip ends that they report independently. We've got enough months now, I think, that we can follow the newer data trend line. They reported 342 members in January and 793 trip starts and 834 trip finishes. And they reported 440 vehicles in service and an average 7 average vehicles per day in Albany over the month. That concludes the presentation.
Any commissioner questions or comments? Any public comments? Okay, we'll move on to the next item. The consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered and will be enacted by one motion unless an item would like to be pulled for discussion.
So I have some adjustments.
Okay, let's go ahead. Okay.
Actually, I'm doing that the wrong way. Sorry. I have some adjustments in the minutes to check with the other commissioners. Page 3 has a statement that says Measure P1 funding will not be used for sidewalk maintenance, which I think is probably not what was said, or if it was said, it's certainly misleading in terms of that's what the P1 funding is for. I think my recollection of the conversation at that point was it was about curb ramps, and so it might have been the Measure P1 funding will not be used for curb ramp upgrades, is my guess, but maybe go back and check on that. And then on page 5, it says quantity of LED lights has degraded. I think that probably should be quality. At least that was my intention to say quality. I think I was the one that raised that. I might have said quantity. I don't know what I said, but.
They're not being raptured?
So with those adjustments.
I'll move approval of the minutes with those adjustments.
I'll
Second? Good. I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes? Okay. Do I need to make a statement, I guess, after? No, okay.
You just did.
I just did, okay.
It passes.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on to item 5-1, proposed red curb at Gateview Avenue Turnaround. I believe that staff has a presentation.
Yes.
I have a quick comment. I think I'm within 1,000 feet of that, so I'm going to step out for this item. Just call me back when you're ready.
Is that top of it?
Yeah, I'll say it's a long block. I'm surprised he's that.
Thank you, Chair. So this item is a proposed red curb, no parking zone for the turnaround at the end of Gateview. And I'll give a brief background and presentation. So for context, this is on Albany Hill. The access to Gateview is from Washington Avenue. It's one point of access, and it dead ends at the north end. It's approximately 940 feet in length from the split from Washington. It is one of the narrowest streets in the city. It's 24 feet wide with a rolled curb, and generally folks mount the curb and park partially in the road and partially on the sidewalk to maintain a wider travel lane. So that's the general character of the street in terms of navigation. It does have turns as well. So at the north end is the turnaround in question. It's a point of access to the Albany Hill natural area. Staff did do some parking surveys to inform the impact on parking. On a Thursday night survey, found 6 out of 9 spaces utilized within 150 feet of the turnaround. And for the entire stretch of Gateview, approximately 70% occupancy. A couple of other occasions that were early afternoon, evening varied from 64 to like 72, 74%. So this is the turnaround itself. At the north end, there are several driveways and a sort of informal couple of parking spots for the undeveloped parcel. The proposal that staff is recommending is for a smaller stretch on the west side and a larger stretch on the east side. And essentially no parking on the top end because of the curb cuts. Earlier presentation, or earlier visual of this had part of that as a red curb too. We could discuss whether that's warranted, just to reiterate that you're not supposed to be parking along that stretch, but it wouldn't be impacting available parking. So this is an aerial showing what staff is requesting. The 16 feet on the west side, 28 feet approximately on the east side. What was earlier submitted, so just some background, staff sent out a notice to residents within 150 feet towards the end of 2018, trying to do this at the staff level. We got a strong response to that in opposition and revisited, worked with Waste Management and the fire department to see if there was any reduction we could do that would still meet their needs. So the earlier submittal is shown here. We had requested a wider area on the east and west side for fire trucks to more easily make the turnaround. The newer request reduces the parking impact and may not be as quick of a turnaround, but fire department thinks that will be navigable for them with some backing up, but something that they wouldn't be stuck essentially with that. A couple more pictures to get a little more specific on what the proposal is. So this is the 16-foot stretch on the west side from where the driveway ends on the north down to sort of the middle point of the turn. Continuing south from there to the first driveway is approximately 58 feet, and that looks like that will fit three vehicles. And the times I've seen vehicles parked there, that's generally what's been parked along there. I haven't seen 4, so up to one impacted space on the west side, but often it seems there are 3 parked there. On the east side, 28 feet removal is proposed, and it's an additional 33 feet to the drive. So this one can fit 2 cars, very tight. If it's a larger vehicle, it would be down to 1 space and what's remaining. And the removal on the west, the northern part, would be 1 to 2, depending on exactly how tightly folks are parked. The idea with the wider area on the east is for fire trucks to be able to swing to the right to start making the turn far enough that they can back up effectively to complete the turn. That's why they were requesting more on the east to get the turn navigated. And here's a few more photos with you get a little better sense without the Google Street View distortion of the wide angle. This is the top approach on the top of the turnaround and showing two vehicles parked on the west side in the lower left photo, and the picture on the lower right shows where that's leaving room for two vehicles. It's where it's a borderline for that, for this, where the red curb ends here. That gets a little tight for two vehicles. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Few questions. So did you get a sense of which residents had available off-street parking? It looks like on the cul-de-sac itself, most of those 3 or 4 properties do.
Yeah, so the property at the upper right with the driveway that goes straight up has, I don't have the zoomed out right here. Let's see. Does have a fair bit of off-street parking. The property to the east has, it's actually both driveways go to that property. They have sort of two driveway access points. The one on the northwest, it's a pretty small garage where the driveway is. Anecdotally, it seems like they're the ones often currently utilizing the other private parcel for parking, and then there is a drive to the next house to the south.
And then, thank you. And then a couple of questions on the service trucks. Is waste management consistent in the time of day that they provide their service, or does that vary? It varies a little bit from what I can gather. I don't know if it's a huge variation, but.
So my understanding, waste management does utilize a day of the week restriction on Hillside on the next block, and I think a day of the week restriction would suffice for their needs.
Okay.
The reason we're recommending the red curb is fire department has also raised access issues, and that would not serve their need.
Okay. And then, yeah, my third question is related to the fire department. Has the fire department been able to make the K-turn or the 3-point turn today with the configuration as it is? And maybe the second point of that is, can they make it up there today? And is the issue that if they get up there for an incident, they have trouble turning back around after the incident? Is that the issue?
My understanding is they've at least expressed they've had to back up the length of Gateview at least.
Gateway.
At least once they were citing having to do that and the difficulty of doing that on the narrow street. So it has occurred.
Okay. So they can't make the 3-point turn today, it seems.
Not with vehicles parked there, that's my understanding.
Okay, thanks.
What's the difference between Gateview and Hillside? It looks like they both, in fact, Hillside looks like it terminates in a narrower slot without a bulb.
Hillside is a wider street. It's 30 feet and has curbs, so it's a little wider, but I would foresee it being similarly difficult for the fire department. It might be a little easier if it's a wider street for them to back up, but I don't think they have a very good turnaround opportunity. The waste management hasn't raised that one. I think that's been raised in the past, which is why there's a stretch a little in from the dead end. It doesn't even have a turnaround point. There's a stretch that's a little south of there that's got a day of the week restriction on both sides that I think is what waste management utilizes to get their vehicles turned around. But I don't think that would serve the fire department.
You don't have a request pending on Hillside, it sounds like.
No.
We'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. If you want to come up to the microphone, and there's speaker cards in the back, if you could fill out a speaker card as well. Go ahead, if you could go to the microphone, because people are watching at home, or we're hoping they're watching at home.
And we're recording it
And we're
for
recording.
posterity.
We'll watch it when we get home.
Hey, so my name is Ron Chang. I am a resident of 695 Gateview Avenue, this house at the absolute end of the street. We are concerned about this situation because of the project that was discussed last month regarding there's a project being built north of the house where maybe those 2 informal parking spaces on the private parcel may be taken out completely and made into like a removable barrier. And if these spaces are made red for, our neighbor at 706 Gateview is concerned that if it's made red and those private parcel spaces are removed, then maybe there wouldn't be enough spaces after all that's being done, because we have no idea on like when maybe they'll start paving on like the project north of 695 Gateview. And regarding the instead, yes, we believe that if Hillside can have just a day of the week restriction, how come this has to be made red while they can just have the day of week restriction while the rest of the time they could park? And with this, noting that that area is 6 out of 9 spaces being taken during a survey, if those 2 private parcel spaces are taken and red spots, the red curb being implemented, then there would be no excess capacity available. And having that would mean that if there's no spaces at the north, already in the middle of the street, there's a lot of spaces being taken like at night. So for someone who's more elderly or infirm but can still drive, they have to park really far down the street to be able to find a space to park, essentially. And also, one more point really quick. With the hours, I can't quite remember what the Hillside hours are, but if those, like instead of painting it red and like having that being maybe like a parking restriction on Thursday between 7 a.m. and sometime in the afternoon, like we'd be okay with that. But we're definitely concerned about the possible painting of red curb over there. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Sir, can I ask you?
Okay.
I happen to notice that from Google Street View that it looks like there are a lot of cars parked on Gateview on the sidewalk.
It's kind of an informal agreement because it was noted a long time ago. I've lived in Albany for 24 years at the street. If people,
I'm just asking if in general people park up on the curb, and does
yeah.
that impede people walking on the curb, on the sidewalk?
I would say technically yes. However,
Great, thank you.
No, any more questions or no?
Hi, I'm Chris. I live at 710 Gateview. Parking's a nightmare up there. We have many people parking. We have people from Washington parking up on Gateview. We have people from the big apartments coming over and parking, walking across the hill, picking up their cars and driving off down the hill. So I'm concerned about less parking spaces. I'm a nurse. I come home at midnight. I don't have a detached, I have a detached garage, so I park on the street. It's safest for me, and there's not going to be any parking at all. So I am concerned about that. Yes, and everybody does park pretty much on the sidewalks. That's a big problem. So I'm concerned about losing more. Also, there's going to be a big development made on the side of the hill. So Gateview may become a through street. It's really uncertain. And I did drive Hillside. I feel a little discriminated against because it's equally as narrow. It's very narrow. And they don't have any red curbing or parking restrictions that are going to be imposed on us. So kind of feels bad. And I don't know if there's any other cul-de-sacs in Albany that are also being restricted like we are. Thanks.
Thank you. Any?
Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Angie Cao. I live at 707 Gateview Avenue. I met Justin yesterday. I talked to him in person. I'm very lucky. He knows what I have said. I hope you can understand. And tonight, I hope you can understand what's in my mind too. I feel the same thing. I got to discriminate because all the red zone is right in front of my house. I mean, the major portion is right in front of my house. Actually, I have 4-car garage. I only have 1 car. I don't need the street parking for myself. But I'm taking care 5 motherless nieces and a nephew. I told Justin yesterday. That's why I bought a big house in Albany, and I love Albany. I used to live in Berkeley, Claremont Hotel, below the Claremont Hotel, Claremont Court. And I saw the big fire happen before, and a lot of people escaped from the hill, but Berkeley Hill was very scary. And I don't think the red zone should come out to this problem because there was no red zone for 80 years already. And our street, I think, is bigger than the hillside. And why now you want to put a red zone right in front of my house? And I pay so much tax. So I feel discriminated. I feel very bad. I talked to him. I want to keep the place open. No red zone looks better. And if my nieces, nephew, I'm taking 3 orphans. My older brother and the sister-in-law, they passed away. I'm taking care of 3 nieces and a nephew, and also 2 from my younger sister. She also passed away also. So 5 motherless kids, they all born and raised up in Berkeley. This is their hometown, okay? And then they all graduated from KALB. Now they went to East to attend the graduate school, such as Harvard, Stanford, yes, I have a niece who went to Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Brown, blah, blah, MIT, okay? So, but when they come back to California, they don't have home anymore. So I have to buy a house, and I have to work very hard to make a bird nest for land. Welcome home, okay? So I hope you can don't put a red zone in front of my house, even though I don't need. But if my nieces and nephew come back, they think I'm old, so they always rent a car from the, sorry, it's my first time to be here, so sorry, I don't know what to do. But anyway, I just feel, they always rent a car and drive to see me. I hope they can park their car easily. And then they want to have a party at my home, to ask their classmates to come home to see their kids, to see their husband or their boyfriend, blah, blah. And this is their home. Now they cannot park, so I feel bad for them, not me, So that's why I had to come here today. It's my first time to attend this meeting. I want to tell you how I feel. I feel I got to discriminate very, very bad too. And I think the main thing is to get a fire escape, one-way down street, as soon as possible, because last year the fire is on the bridge already. So scary. This is important. And yesterday I met a lady, and she told me she saw the campfire in the woods. Campfire, it's more important. And the dry woods, this is more hassle than these things.
Thank you very much.
I always let waste management or whoever needs to turn around, they use my wide open driveway to turn around. I don't charge a penny. They are welcome to use, okay?
Great. Thank you very much.
So no problem. You are welcome, sir, but don't put any red zone in front of my house, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Any other public comment? It doesn't look like anyone else wants to speak. You can just give it to staff. That's fine. You don't need a staple. Thank you, though. So we'll go ahead and close public comment and open it up for commissioner discussion.
Oh, my thought is if the fire department's asked for this, and particularly in this location, where there is some wildfire risk, then we need to put safety first.
I'm sorry, I had two follow-up questions based upon the public comment. One, the project that was discussed in the first comment, how would that affect Gateview and the parking there?
So I think everyone is referring to a potential application. It's extremely speculative at this stage, but it is, the city has been approached on a pre-application basis by a developer who's considering acquiring that property. And they developed a conceptual site plan that had a linkage, a roadway linkage from Gateview looping around up to Hillside and down to Pierce, but it would have been for emergency access only, so there wouldn't be any regular through traffic. I wouldn't.
And there's no actual applicant.
There's no actual application. If and when an application comes in, it would be an extended period of time to work through that application. So I would suggest making a decision based on what's on the ground today. And should something happen there, whether it's the project that's been put forth or something completely different, we would adjust this when the time came if we needed to. This isn't something that it's just paint. We can make those adjustments relatively easy when something does change up there.
Yeah, I watched the study session in planning and zoning, and I'd be pretty surprised given the feedback if that project went forward in that configuration. I mean, that there were aspects of it that were noted that don't meet or seem to meet various general plan policies. I'm not on planning and zoning, so I don't know if a project can go through without meeting those general plan policies, but if those do have some force of law, then that project looks like it wouldn't comply. But again, that's outside the remit of this body.
Yeah.
I just want to note that this commission and staff in the city put a lot of energy into opening up the sidewalks on Washington and trying to ameliorate blocked sidewalks. And this is an access to what is currently open space, and some of it may remain open space with the project coming up. So something to keep an eye on for the future. I think the fire department is due to buy a new truck in the near future. But we have the trucks that we have now, and given that, staff has worked with the residents to reduce the parking requirement, and we need to have the safety that we can get now. But personally, I'm working to reduce the size of fire trucks for safety issues. But for now, I would go with the plan.
I also appreciate staff trying to be responsive to the community and minimize the red curbs so that we can retain spaces. I'm also, if the fire department has asked for it, I think it's something that we should seriously consider. And again, if things change at that Pierce Street property and the roadway changes or there's a connection, we can always come back and reevaluate. Is that turnaround necessary for the fire trucks?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I agree. It's hard to favor inconvenience over safety, inconvenience of loss of parking over safety, and so therefore, if this is what's needed for safe access for fire trucks, as well as for the services provided to the street for waste management, then I move approval for staff's recommendation.
I'll second.
We forgot to call him back.
We can't call him back. We're not. Yeah, he's.
Oh, no, that's
yeah,
right.
that's right. Yeah, it's been going on a while, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if I could just address the comment that Hillside, I guess, doesn't have red curbs. I mean, obviously, it would have been an ideal of when Hillside was built if it had a turnaround at the end as well. But But I think there's utility to having at least one. I mean, I think making an argument that neither of them should be possible for the fire truck to turn around, given the eucalyptus trees and the wildfire hazard, it's better to have one than none.
Yeah, good point.
I agree. Okay, so we had a motion.
And a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then we have one absence. So is this a resolution? Recommendation passes.
And you go on to the next item?
We'll go on to the next item.
Fareed even came back?
Came back, yay. I thought we had forgotten to call you back.
Someone else go.
And Preston's leave.
Okay. And then we lose another one. Okay, so we'll move on to item 5.2, 5-2 rather, proposed red curb at Brighton and Cornell intersection approaches. I believe staff has a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a proposed intersection red curb treatment at Brighton and Cornell, and I'll talk through the context here. So for context, this is in North Albany, adjacent to the El Cerrito Plaza Shopping Center, and Cornell is in the middle between Masonic and San Pablo. The configuration with stop sign treatments is it's a two-way stop-controlled intersection between the four-way stop-controlled intersection at Stanage and again at Talbot. In terms of the intersection red curb policy, Brighton is on the priority sidewalk network, and it is near commercial and school trip generators, so it is for those factors a priority for intersection red curb treatment. In terms of why Cornell and Brighton at this point, the volume data that we've collected to date for the North Albany Traffic Calming Project does show Cornell as the highest volume cross street of Brighton from the shopping center. There was also one reported collision of vehicle collision at the intersection. There weren't pedestrian collisions reported. There have been anecdotal comments coming in that there have been other collisions at the intersection and safety issues that aren't in the reported data. And there have been several concerns from residents regarding this intersection and the safety of crossing it. In terms of the intersection red curb policy, the policy recommends a preferred 15 to 20 feet on the approach side of an intersection and states that 3 to 10 feet with preferred 10 feet on the departure side, with some variations to accommodate potential mitigation of loss of parking spaces or extending beyond if it's a curb space that's too small for a viable parking spot. This is also consistent with the North Albany traffic calming plans that are proposing traffic circles at various locations, additional striping and signage treatments, did also include the red curb treatments at all the intersections along Brighton. In terms of the specifics for this intersection, the proposed feet of red curb are illustrated here, and I can talk through each of the intersections. So this is from each of the approaches. On the upper left corner is the northwest corner of the intersection, 10 feet proposed on the departure side. It's 54 feet to the drive, so depending on how many spaces, so it's 2 spaces at the end. Currently, it's 2 or 3, depending on how people park. On the southbound approach side, the proposal is 16 feet. That's what gets you to the driveway, and that's one of the places. Because it's 16 feet, folks have been parking pretty close to the intersection. In the upper right-hand corner on the northeast side of the intersection, on the the westbound approach side, there's no proposed additional red curb. There's currently a fire hydrant there that I think has 17 feet current. And on the departure side, it's 7 feet to the existing blue curb accessible space designation. On the southwest corner in the bottom left, 21 feet on the approach side gets you to the driveway, and then 10 feet on the departure side of a 100-foot length curb to the first driveway. And then in the bottom right, the southeast corner, 20 feet on the approach side is of a 40-foot stretch to the drive, so that's takes one space and leaves a clear one space remainder. On the departure side, the 10-foot recommended is another, it's 52 feet currently to the drive, and so leaves it with 2 spaces and debatable whether currently 3 can fit or sometimes they can fit depending on how people park. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
And there was one public comment about?
Yes, there was one public comment.
So questions from the commissioners?
My one question was this already approved under North Albany traffic calming plan, or is this separate?
So the red curb treatment was part of the recommended programming of the North Albany traffic calming. We haven't yet brought final designs of the, but it's been an element of the overall traffic calming plan.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? We'll open a public comment. Please fill out a comment card and come on. Give it to him.
Or it's automatic.
That's fine.
So hi, my name is Wayne Moore. I live at 1200 Brighton, right over here. And I've lived there next door for about 35 years. So we're all concerned about the whole thing of losing parking spots. And it's already a parking stressed area, partly because everybody's got a lot of cars in our area, partly because people that are working in El Cerrito plazas like to park in our area because they can't find any places. People even park there, and we see them get their suitcases and go off to the BART station. All kinds of things. And then people are visiting for 15 minutes or, overnight or something like that. So what happens is if we lose some of these, like I park up near the stop sign here, so somebody can park here in case somebody's visiting down here. So if we lose this spot, it just puts stress on this whole neighborhood because it's like a pressure valve that, here's an extra spot, now it's gone.
Can we have you come to the microphone so we can...
Oh, I'm sorry. Do I need to repeat that? No, okay. And so any parking spots we lose, we really feel it. And I went out this morning and I talked to all the neighbors in the 4 corner neighbors. They would be here, except Jean Helwig has a broken back, and then there's a renter, of course, in the apartment building, and the other people don't normally come to things like this. But we all had the same concern. And Joan, that lives a couple doors down on Brighton, is the one that emailed you the letter this morning. We don't want traffic circles, and we would love to have 4 stop signs to improve safety, but to reduce our parking just stresses out all of us. So I would say if you have to have red, let's reduce it down to the bare minimum. Matter of fact, having the 20 feet by our house there, really, you don't really need 20 feet because you can't even see around that corner anyway because there's a 3-foot high a wall there with shrubs in it. So you don't really need 20 feet there. If you had 10 feet or 5 feet, if you had 5 feet at every place around there, that would really, help out rather than having these higher amounts. So I just ask that you'd, we're all concerned about safety, but we're even more concerned about having to lose our parking spots, because we would all like to have Cornell cut off, or have it be a one-way street or something like that, or signs that say local traffic only or something. It seems like we have to pay for that access, and to have us to further pay by losing parking spots is hard on us. So, any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Kathy Madison. I live on Cornell, and I'm the one who has been begging for, I'm not so concerned about Brighton, but this right here, this 16, is ridiculous. You have the stop sign, and it says stop, and there's a white line where you stop, which is right at the corner, and there will be like a huge Ford or a BMW parked right up to the corner every day, all day long. And cars are coming and going and in and out and honking and turning, and it's just insane. And if you would just, I really don't care about anyone else. If you would just put that in and maybe the 10.
Honesty.
It would help tremendously, because it's just that they can park right up to the corner with some huge car and leave it sit there all day while 2,000 cars a day are going up and down that street. And there's kids trying to cross, there's the schools up there, there's people walking back and forth from BART. It's just, we need to close off that street to start with. Thank you so much for saying that, because it's not a thoroughfare, but that's what it is. And so please, at least this corner. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comments. Back to the commission. Thoughts?
So I'm going to kind of start with the basic premise that the traffic calming plan is a decided decision by the city. We would spend a lot of time if we reconsidered every decision every time a location came up. So we kind of need to, unless we have dramatic reason to change, stick with the course. I don't see dramatic reason to change. I think some of the comments that were made do sort of touch on the importance of being able to see up and down Brighton as more critical, because that's the street without the stop signs. So the red curb on Brighton becomes perhaps the most critical for people at the stop signs to be able to see the approaching cars that don't have a stop sign. So if we wanted to deviate or nuance this at all, the 20 feet on the northbound approach maybe could reduce, but I think all the red curb that's proposed on Brighton itself we should keep. The last comment of cars parking right up to the corner, so they're essentially ahead of the stop bar, or even parallel with the stop bar, because if there's a big car and you're next to it, you can't see past it. I think there has to be some red curb set back behind the stop bar, whether it's 5, 10, or more. We have to have something there, or we're really not getting reliable sight lines. So that's kind of my thought.
You don't have to allow.
Do you want to, we'll go on. Did we have additional commissioner comments?
Yeah, I support staff's recommendation. We're near to the middle school. I do a lot of walking with my kids, and even at stop sign intersections, if you don't have the daylighting at the intersection, it's nerve-wracking if you're not sure if that car who's approaching the stop sign is going to see you or not, especially if you're under 4 feet tall. So daylighting the curb is a standard that we put forward and approved at this commission, and therefore we should implement it as the policy expresses, as well as the plan had shown, the North Albany traffic calming plan.
I'm generally in favor of the staff plan, and I think it makes sense to mark the curbs red now in preparation for the North Albany calming plan, so we don't have to do it twice and go through this again. There was a comment made in the letters about issues with people not cooperating well on spaces on the street, and I guess I want to ask staff if there are some spaces that could be marked to improve that situation.
I'd have to look into it. We generally discourage the individual marking because you lose additional spaces potentially with that. I think some of these would become clearer being 1 or 2 spaces remaining versus now where there are 2 or 3.
Let me be more specific. I'm thinking specifically of places where 2 moderate-sized cars can fit between driveways if they're courteous to each other, that kind of situation.
I'd have to,
I would encourage you to take a look at that.
Can I add? Sure. So as working in the Public Works Department, we're tasked with putting those in and then also maintaining them. So what we've seen is that we have plenty of work for the staff that we do have. Putting more markings on streets is just an additional maintenance effort for us to do, not just here, but requests in other parts of the city that also are taxed or stressed with parking. So there is a balance. There is an internal cost for that.
And there's also a balance between taking away and trying to make the situation better, which I'm trying to encourage. That's all. It may not make sense to make any of those markings. I understand that.
I know this was discussed at length prior to my arrival at the Traffic and Safety Commission, so I support this staff's proposal here.
Do we need a motion?
Anybody want to make a motion?
I move that we endorse staff's proposal for red striping the curbs at the corner of Brighton and Cornell.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes. Passes.
Preston.
Preston.
There he is.
Just hand me the mouse.
Okay, so we will
There you go.
move on to item 5-4, the expenditure of sugar-sweetened beverage tax.
Forgot about that one.
Is there a?
5-3?
Oh, sorry, 5-3. I'm sorry. I was like, we're flying through this. Okay.
Is there a game on?
This is my first time here, so I'm going to make lots of mistakes the
enough.
first time up here. Okay. So we'll move on to item 5-3, curb ramp plans for Washington Avenue Pavement Project.
Yes, thank you. So this is the Washington Avenue Pavement Rehabilitation Project. Just as bring the commission up to speed in terms of where the design is. We received a preliminary design submittal that included all of the pavement-related restoration recommendations. Today, we're going to primarily focus on design elements around traffic, around pedestrian safety, around drainage, so that you guys can kind of comment back on those and have an idea of what those elements look like. The paving itself, it looks like it's going to be, you know, a 6-inch hot mix asphalt, so that's just kind of the design recommendation based on the street condition as it is now. How do I move this? Oh, there we go. No? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So the agenda I'm going to run through is the striping, proposed striping, the existing drainage issues and how we're managing those through the design, curb ramps, which ones are in compliance and we won't be touching, which ones are out of compliance, and that we will be having a recommended treatment for those, and then the Masonic bulb outs. So this is Washington and Talbot, and this is a typical intersection. So I'm going to just review the existing drainage lines that we have there now, so you guys have an idea of what we're having to deal with in the design element. It's a little bit difficult to see, but I'll begin at the northeast corner. The flow lines travel from east to west and also from south to north. So in the northwest corner, the northeast corner, what we have is the flow lines of the storm drain water would on the surface side. Feel free. I've got my trusty assistant here. So the northwest corner is the easiest in some respects. The flow line will move the water away from the pedestrian path of travel to the west and then also to the north. On the northeast side, the path of travel for the water crosses both pedestrian paths, north-south and east-west. And on the bottom part of the slide, on the south direction, you've got the path of travel east to west, and south to north. Because of the existing configuration in this location, there is a valley gutter there, so it moves the water. Once it hits the intersection, it'll move it westward. So that's the predominant way where the path of travel for the water. So the easiest thing to do is design with that in mind to keep those same flow patterns intact. So this is the Talbot intersection. So regarding the striping, we are proposing the 444 striping to cross Washington Avenue. We can certainly consider other configurations to have the high visibility crossings elsewhere, but that's because Talbot is a part of the pedestrian pathway. The other intersections that have the same treatment are Key Route and Masonic, but this would be a typical one that you would see on Talbot. The ones that are not part of the pedestrian pathway would get the standard crossings. Along with that, there are also the red curb treatments. I believe Washington, for the most part, already has red curb treatments, so we would be refreshing those. I don't think we're recommending any additional red curbs, but I'll have to walk the street to confirm that. I think for the most part, those are already in place. And you do also see on here the Bike Boulevard stencils, so those will be new. The extent of the project is going to go from San Pablo up to Pomona, so we'll have the bike stencils kind of in the same configuration as you're approaching or as you're exiting an intersection. This is the striping on Key Route. Feedback from Justin earlier this week was that it would be beneficial, because we do get a lot of traffic in this area, to have the high visibility 444s in the east-west direction as well. And curb ramps. Let's see. Oh, let me go back just for a moment. 1 second. I can do it here. This is fine. Let me bring you, before we talk about curb ramps, let me talk about drainage just a little bit more. On the southern part of the intersection, we've got the valley gutter. So this valley gutter we're actually proposing to move further into the intersection. So what we have is a path of travel for the proposed new curb ramps that would be south of the valley gutters, and then we would push the valley gutters northward, so that there's some separation between where the pedestrians are going to be moving and where the water is going to be flowing.
What does that do to the angle of the pavement across? If you were walking in line from the sidewalk, it looks like you would remain on the asphalt on the southern side of the street?
Yes, that's correct.
How angled is that asphalt, and does it still meet ADA requirements for tilting?
So the cross slope for that crossing is at a maximum of 2%. So we need to put that into the design, as that's the expectation, is that they would keep that at less than 2%.
So it's a gradual slope of the asphalt down to the cement valley gutter?
That's right. Yeah, at no more than 2%. So they would have to conform backwards if they're getting to more than 2%, they would push back even further back down either Talbot on either direction.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. And in terms of the curb ramps, we're proposing directional curb ramps as a standard where we're touching them. The challenge with these intersections is that they're very small. So the directional curb ramps introduce a little wedge of concrete. So if we look at this detail on the left side, at that very tip of that intersection, you see a small wedge of concrete. We have one example of this in Albany that I'm aware of at San Gabriel and Brighton at the middle school, where they put the annex. So as you search for that in your Google Street View, I don't think it's actually updated yet on Google Street View. It's a few months old. Well, it's fairly new.
You know us well.
But what you end up getting is you get something that's a little bit bigger than a sheet of paper that is a wedge that one, it benefits drainage. So there are some upsides to this. It keeps the water out of the yellow striped domed area. It directs traffic directionally, so you don't dump people out into the middle of the intersection. You're moving them either north, south, or east, west. It does introduce a tripping hazard.
I've seen somebody trip there.
You've seen people trip there, and we're putting them in several locations. We would, the drawing that you see here has a call out for yellow paint. So it would essentially be the same yellow treatment that you would get with the domes.
How high is it?
It's about the size of a curb, so it probably starts at 4 and might taper off backwards as you move away from the street towards the back of the curb. The picture on the right is, I believe, Stanage and Washington. So it's hard to see because it's in a shadow, but there is a planter box on the back of curb there. So I'm highlighting this because typically what we like to see is the back of curb have a curb stop outside the traveled way, outside the sidewalk. We would with the planter box there, we would put the curb inside the sidewalk walking area. This particular location, because it's got enough pedestrian pathway, it still doesn't impede the 4 feet minimum. If it did, we can move into the planter. As you can see, the planter in this location is already paved over. So we don't really have a 4-foot issue with restrictions. But I did want to highlight it because it is an element that in other locations may become an issue. For the most part, if you walk up and down Washington, this isn't an area where this is a big issue. This is the one area that I found on the alignment that the planter is impeding 6 inches into the public right-of-way. It would otherwise would have been city responsible sidewalk.
That was the corner of Stanage and Washington?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. And these are, so there's an issue with the Masonic bulb outs. We put this diagram in there for your consideration because we asked NCE, our consultant, to show us what a 5-foot bulb out would look like on the west side of Masonic. So this is Washington goes east, left, right across the screen, and Masonic goes north, south. So any movements from southbound Masonic onto Washington puts a kind of a standard like delivery truck into oncoming traffic. You'd have to cross over that stop bar there for that traffic movement. And the same thing would happen if you're on Washington traveling eastbound, making a right onto Masonic. You're going to be swinging out onto the northbound traffic lane. So what you see here is the stop bar is already set back on that Masonic intersection, the northbound Masonic area. So the current stop bar is the one that's kind of shaded, and the proposed stop bar is below that. So we're already moving the stop bar back, and you would still get trucks swinging out. So one choice would be to instill the 5 feet bulb outs, and then trucks would essentially just have to wait for traffic to clear. Or it might be your proposal to simply just not use a bulb out, recognizing that it would introduce that traffic pattern. So I think those were the bigger elements in terms of pedestrian issues and traffic.
Have you run the bulb outs past the fire department?
We have not. I was supposed to do that earlier, and I did not. I'm happy to do that in other areas.
So we don't have the information. Okay.
Fair.
Thanks.
Okay, Commissioner, questions?
Let's see that. So in gray in the background, the existing bike boulevard symbols are shown. It seems like if you go back to the striping. Yeah, so you can see, I presume what's in gray is what's out there already.
Yes.
And so it looks like the bike boulevard symbols are going to shift towards the center line a little bit in the new design.
Yes, we called that out to the designer, asking them to put, I believe the standard is 13 feet from curb.
Great, fantastic, because 12 is too far, so thank you for catching that. I mean, too close. Thank you for catching that.
It's credit to Justin on that one.
Thank you, Justin. I don't know what the planned frequency of bike boulevard symbols is, if it just stays the same as it is now. I know some of the north-south streets where they've been painted, the frequency seems high, even to me as a cyclist. And I know some people who live on those streets have said it seems like pretty intense, the number of symbols. I don't know what the standard is in Berkeley, but they're definitely, I'm thinking like the 900 block of Talbot and the 2 blocks of Spokane got them, and I think there's maybe 5 each direction, which I think in Berkeley there would probably be 2 on a block that length.
I think these are 2 on each block, and I can confirm that.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. So these are short blocks, so that's more of a long block. Question, comment. If you go to, if you could go to the one that had Talbot and Washington. And so does this show, I know you're emphasizing the striping here, but does this also show, in this preliminary design that there's 3 corners that are going to have curb ramp, some curb ramp touch to them?
Yes, it does. So what I'm looking at here is the curb ramps on both of the ones on the northwest and northeast, and then the southwest. So this is a good illustration. So the bulb out on the curb ramp on the southeast is the one on the southeast is in compliance. So we're not proposing any improvements to that curb ramp. Given that, we're not going to do a directional ramp on the southwest. So we'll do a standard curb ramp on the southwest so that it matches the southeast corner. The ones on the north will be directional. Does that make sense?
I understand.
Sure you do.
I have comments, but
Yeah.
we'll get to that later. Oh, I think you raised so putting in these little, I guess you could call them corner lozenges or splitters, and there's ramps along Portland that were installed between Masonic and Key Route as a project back when that was repaved. And they're essentially the same design, but without the splitters. So I'm curious, why put that tripping hazard in there? Has there been a problem with those existing ones? I mean, they've been in place for about, I think, 6 years. So if there's been no problem, then seems like just go for a wide open apron.
We have not had any pedestrian issues with those. There may be some localized drainage issues that I can go back and talk to Public Works staff about. We were responding to the fact that the directional ramps are the city standard. So we did not want to deviate that without communicating with you guys.
Okay. We'll discuss.
Yeah. How does the piece in the middle help drainage?
So the piece in the middle helps drainage by keeping the flow line defined for water to move around to keep water in the gutter pan rather than either stopping or moving on to the yellow domed area. So without that, if there is a deviation in the slopes, then you're just going to get water sitting there. With a wedge, you're going to get a more defined path of travel. It doesn't always work that way, but that's what we're hoping with most of these locations.
I'm not a hydrologist, but I'm having trouble picturing how the wedge.
Well, if you have
accomplishes
if you have a curb, if you have a wedge, the water is the water is essentially stopped there, and it's going to. If it's going to stop, it's going to puddle in front of the wedge. But if it's going to move around the gutter pan. If you don't have the wedge, then you've got an open angle there that water can move up or back towards the sidewalk.
Is the wedge like reflective, or is there, when I first saw that at the middle school, I was like, oh, that looks odd. And then 2 seconds later, I saw a guy trip over it. So
the wedge at the middle school is just plain concrete. It
Okay.
didn't get any treatment. So
Okay.
you can paint wedges. You can put reflective
Okay.
identifiers on them. You can put a little standard there that sits up. So there's a lot of different treatments you can do to it.
Mm-hmm.
But the one at San Gabriel is just concrete.
Do they have tapers
Tapers
on the wedge?
on the back side.
On the front side by the crosswalk ramp.
We would have to design that in there.
Is it just like a prefabricated? I haven't seen it.
No, it's formed.
Okay.
Essentially, it's vertical faces of concrete that are straight edges in the line of the sidewalk and curved fronting the road.
Correct.
And they're all curb height, but the ramp comes up so the back appears lower.
Correct.
So it's a
But,
pie.
but the top is level.
It's a pie.
shape, right?
Yes. The crust faces the road.
Yeah.
Okay. The way I'm picturing it, I think you would get 2 puddles instead of 1.
Too small area.
But be that as may, thank you. In this illustration, there's a line that doesn't make sense to me. This is a minor thing. On the northwest corner, behind the curb cut, there's a horizontal line to your right, up. There, yeah. Could you tell me what that is? Maybe it's just an artifact.
Yeah, I'd have to go back to the original design drawing. It could be a grade break approaching the intersection, yeah.
The general approach is that you start the grade break back on the.
I'm sorry, you start to grade paint?
Grade break.
Grade break.
It's more defined here. You start the grade break here, you get down to grade, so that's probably what's happening here.
So it's a grade differential.
So to get us to the proper elevation here, you have to start back this way.
Yep.
And it's more pronounced here,
Great.
but this one's just.
That makes sense to me. Thank you. In in the last time you came with the paving plan for Washington, I think you brought it, Mark, and we noted, or I noted, in your analysis picture, you showed the block of Washington between Key Route and Pomona as also being highly damaged. And I asked at that time why that block wasn't included in this paving project, and I think you were going to check that out.
It is included now. It goes all the way up to Pomona.
Great. That's not shown in the diagram on the front page of this rehabilitation curbs and strand.
I think we just grabbed the right one, but they're doing survey and
Okay.
doing that.
That
right
answers
now.
the question. Thank you. That's all I want to ask at the moment.
Any other questions for staff? And I'm guessing if there's nobody here, we don't have open public comment. I'll open and close. I'll open and close public comment. And then I guess.
Preston might have some more questions.
Well, yes.
So this showed select intersections. Does that mean that there's no curb ramp upgrading at the other intersections, or is this just because these are illustrative, picked to be illustrative?
So I have curb ramps at Spokane, Evelyn, and Talbot that are in compliance. So those will have kind of the treatment on the bottom where one ramp is in compliance, so the other ramp is a standard. The changed curb ramps I have at Keynes, Stanage, Cornell, and Masonic.
Okay, I didn't quite follow that. So Keynes, Stanage, Cornell, Masonic.
Correct.
But you're also, this shows you're doing work at Talbot.
Correct. So I listed Talbot as one because there's one curb ramp that is in compliance. Evelyn has one curb ramp on the south side that's also in compliance.
Oh, I see.
Spokane also has curb ramps that are in compliance.
Okay.
So our approach to design is if it's in compliance, we're going to keep it in place and we're going to design around
I see. So there's 3 curb ramps that are well, I don't know how many are at Spokane, but I think you said there's one at Talbot and one at Cornell.
I think within this design, this scope of work only has 4 ramps that are actually in compliance.
Okay. All right. And I guess the full plan set will come to us at some point. Is that the idea or not?
Yeah, the idea here was to present you with some of these design elements and take them back and implement them. And then I think we're actually very close. Depending on how much comment we get here, we're actually turning these around.
So these were picked to be illustrative then? I mean, the other intersect. Okay. Thank you.
Question on the valley gutters. So they're proposed, and I'm looking at the curb ramp diagram. With the valley. Yep. So they're on the south side, and I think that's for multiple intersections, and not on the north side because of the slope of the roadway?
Because of the slope of the roadway and where we see the drainage patterns, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think on all of these intersections, you're going to see water moving northward away from these intersections. You don't need the valley gutter moving it west.
Right, okay.
Comment? Additional comments?
I've got comments. One is if we look at the striping diagram with the crosswalks, I would tend to recommend that when we use the 444 crosswalks, that we would want to consider putting a stop bar between the stop legend and the 444, just to enhance the clarity a little bit.
Gotcha.
It's not mandatory, but I think it is easier for people to understand and follow. With respect to the locations where we are putting a wedge between the directional curb ramps, I would suggest making those be a contrasting color to the truncated dome panels. So if the truncated dome panels are yellow, maybe paint it red, which is a fine color to have on a corner curb anyway. You could also put a retroreflective pavement marker on top of it to make it more visible at night. So I think The color is primarily for the benefit of pedestrians, just so they're noticing it if they're a little bit distracted and don't trip over it. I kind of get the drainage benefits of it. It's very nuanced. In the more extreme cases, if our drainage doesn't work as well as we like, honestly, it's a stepping stone. That's not a bad thing.
Sea level rise.
Yeah, no, I mean, hopefully everything flows well and we don't get any uplift from trees that weren't anticipated, things like that. But worst case scenario, it actually does serve a little bit of a purpose in wet weather, if an inlet gets clogged, et cetera.
So if I may, where would you step from that? Into the middle of the intersection?
Well, into the crosswalk. If you're dealing with a valley gutter, that's why I like the valley gutter moving away from the intersection. Instead of having the pedestrians cross in the valley gutter, you're having them cross where it's flatter or out of the valley gutter. That's positive. But yeah,
if we can switch to that slide, just to continue the discussion,
yeah.
It seems that the separators are located in the deepest part of the separator of the valley gutter, and if you really wanted to avoid the water, you would use the narrower portion.
Or you could just walk to the left of the ramp.
Exactly.
I mean, we're assuming it's someone who doesn't need the ramp if you're going to use it as a stepping stone anyway.
I'm just saying it doesn't look like it would get you much of anywhere.
No, I don't necessarily walk in straight lines either, so it's fine. You kind of step and then hop a little bit left. But
I'd like to see that.
Just let me know when it's raining and it's flooded at one of these intersections. We'll go give it a shot.
All right.
No, I mean, I'm okay with them. I just think the contrasting color would be consistent with what I sort of envision as the objectives of ADA standards of having the truncated domes as a contrasting color with the rest of the pavement. You don't want to make an obstacle blend into them. You want it to contrast. That's really the key. The stepping stone thing is just a random observation of no particular value because it certainly has nothing to do with ADA compliance at all. That's all I had.
All right, let me get to my notes here. Where did those go? Sorry about that. Well, I guess speaking of the stepping stones, I would support not including those in the design. Speaking hydrologically, I think as Commissioner McCroskey pointed out, they could actually serve a counter purpose in terms of drainage in that they could create 2 points where the water could back up and create a puddle. It'd be better to have basically a skimmer going across the entire apron than have it hit a obstacle and back up and pool at that point, because then it would just get deeper at that point. Also the trip hazard, I mean, it's pretty obviously a trip hazard. We have an anecdotal report, it's a trip hazard. I haven't heard that there's any problems, and I haven't observed any problems with the curb ramps that are, as I say, on Portland at Spokane, and I mean, I think it's actually on Spokane at Portland and Washington and the west side of Key Route, and it's basically these designs without that center block. So I would just go with that. I mean, those are directional. I mean, the point of directional is you can go straight ahead in the direction of travel. I mean, that's the goal of them. And, you know, they have a splitter when you're actually not doing this, whatever this is called, type C. I can't remember the types. When you're doing this kind of ramp where you're dropping down to street level, you know, it makes sense in that case. But in this case, where you're going down to street level, they're not needed. It's not a fundamental part of the design. So I would encourage us to give the feedback to get rid of those. As far as putting in a diagonal ramp that leads into an existing valley gutter, I mean, you probably, well, you may have heard the history on those, but those were built out of spec, out of plan. They were approved by an engineer who should not have approved them at the time. They were done as kind of an add-on to a contract, and they were put in, you know, a decade at least after diagonal curb ramps had been made not acceptable by policy. And so to continue that there, and they're really bad at that location with the valley gutter because you're basically directed right into the convergence of flow from two directions.
So we recognize that, and one of the things we're looking at doing is redoing those valley gutters and pushing them out and getting the path of travel outside of the valley gutter. And so we're still kind of working the details of that, but that we recognize that that's a problem and looking at trying to correct it. We don't want to push the accessible pathway into a gutter.
May I? Is it less expensive to redo all of the cement across the street than to redo the curb?
I think I think regardless, we'd have to do the valley gutter and push what happens, the previous one took the flow line and moved it in, so we need to move it out.
So you're doing that anyway, I see.
My sense is we're still working the details of that, but my sense is we're at least moving the flow line out, and we'll see how it conforms back into the curb ramps.
Sorry.
Yeah, so those two valley gutters, one was at Evelyn, one was at Talbot. So my vote would be to completely fix them and not leave diagonal ramps there because it's just a mess and they should have never been built in the first place. And this is why I'm always on about, you know, we need to eliminate diagonal ramps in our standards so it's very clear. Let's see what else. I don't know if this design specifies high friction truncated dome mats as opposed to the standard, which are pretty slippery when they're wet. And that's another thing I would like to get into the city's standard, but at least for this project, if that could be specified. And I think you have a specification now because it was included in the project for the path from 8th to 10th on Cordonesis Creek. So that project includes specification for high friction mats. By the standard, all retaining curbs are to be radiused where they can, and there's lots of retaining curbs shown in this design that are not radiused. So that's not meeting standard currently. I mean, I know there's exceptions where there's an impediment, and I actually think it's useful to go to the last slide, if you would. So, sorry, the second to last. So this is a great example where an unpermitted encroachment is limiting the city's ability to use its property in the manner that it wants to. So we're going to be forced to have a corner there, potentially narrow the sidewalk because there's an unpermitted encroachment there. So, you know, I just want to keep bringing that up because I find it unacceptable that the city's use of its property to create the best facilities it can is being limited by these encroachments. And I would encourage the city in these situations not to just abide by the encroachment, say to the property owner, you know, we're gonna move back your planter box by 6 inches and put the radius in that where it meets our standard. I mean, I don't know why we would just let the property owner continue to have that property when we're coming through and doing a new project. The bulb outs at Masonic, on the one side of Masonic, I presume those are in there because that's an ATP element. I note that there's also an ATP element to bulb out the entire width of the greenway into the street, and I would rate that tremendously more important than these bulb outs from a value engineering perspective. Now, obviously, doing that would be more expensive potentially than doing these, but if we're in value engineering, I would say eliminate these and put those in, because I mean the Albany Greenway gets, you know, like 2,000 users a day going that direction, and so making that crossing safer by narrowing it, and it would also serve to eliminate the parking that occurs there, which helps with visibility, because I don't think it's red curbed the entire width of the Greenway now. So I'd really encourage you to look at doing that either in addition to or instead of doing these. I may have other things when I look at my notes, but I'll stop there for the moment.
If I could ask a question quickly on that one, Preston, you're talking about bulbing out into Masonic or bulbing out into Washington?
Into Washington.
Okay. So shortening the crossing. Yeah.
Right, and that's what's in the ATP.
Yep.
I could interject if you're pausing. So let me get to the right picture. I'm on the the Masonic and, I'm sorry, the Washington and Key Route intersection. Due to an injury in my family, I've been driving to the high school twice a day for a couple weeks now. And I got to say that all of the intersections at Washington, Portland, and Thousand Oaks are slightly different, although the Brighton intersection is different as well. What happens when there are a lot of pedestrians is that it's very hard to negotiate with the other vehicle drivers when you're driving a car. And the length and of the distance between the stop signs east-west means that it's very difficult to make eye contact with the other drivers, especially when you're trying to negotiate with the pedestrians who really don't want to negotiate with you. I'm not necessarily in favor of making it higher throughput. You know, that's not my goal. But at the intersection of Brighton and Key Route, there are interstitial stop signs in the middle of the intersection. And what that does is it makes a rational four-way stop that drivers are used to and negotiate with each other and with the pedestrians realistically, and they have a good view of each other. These other three intersections don't have that, and I wouldn't bring it up, except it comes up on this plan in your painting. So I would love to see the three intersections be conformed to the Brighton example in order to reduce both the potential for accidents and the potential for speed through the intersection as somebody accelerates.
Can I ask, is the median the same width at all three of these intersections? Like, can a car fit?
I believe it's close,
Yeah.
if not the same.
It seems like it's the same alignment. I don't think it's
okay.
much different.
I don't think the alignment changes until after Key Route becomes
You're right, I think you're right, yeah.
Ashbury,
Yeah,
further north.
right, okay.
I'm sorry, this adds an element of, that's not in the plans, but I thought it was only fair to bring it up. Moving on. Are the raised domes supposed to be installed in the direction of travel, ideally, in a curb ramp?
I'm seeing a nod over here by one of your fellow commissioners.
Well, he does have some experience, so I take that nod as fairly affirmative.
Unless you're wrapping it around the corner, in which case you really can't. But as
Well,
much as
it's
possible.
interesting because once you put that stepping stone in, you could, if you did that, which I'm not actually in favor of, then you've sort of broken it up, and potentially you could install the dots directionally, and I would think that would be the rational thing to do.
You could do that, and your wedge could just be flush rather than raised.
Right. So you could do it no matter what and leave a wedge.
I think so.
In my mind, I've actually haven't refilled my glasses prescription in a long time, and I'm living with some short-sightedness and nearsightedness together, and I'm seeing the world in a different way. But when I don't have problems with color, and I don't have problems seeing crossings, but it seems to me that the shape of the truncated dome panel is actually pretty instructive for somebody with low sight. And with these wraparound curb cuts, we've negated that. And part of the rationale behind working hard to try and change the standard was to give people a direction to go so that they were clear about crossing the street with other users of the intersection, i.e. motorists, and so that it was obvious to them where to go. So I am in favor of eliminating a raised wedge, and I'm in favor of a fairly standard shape of truncated dome panel indicating access to the street. Now, you cut off the edges, maybe it's a little rounded on one side, that's a detail. But in general, a standard kind of, that's the obvious place to go and the direction to go panel. If the wedge has to go in, which I don't prefer, I prefer a vertical marker to at least waist height. And paint the cement red. That sounds fabulous. I'm thinking one of those flexible bollards that just comes back up. Okay, somebody's going to use it as a T-ball stand, but there's a lot of visibility there. I think that's a low risk. The other thing I want to just touch on is in the second to last slide on the curb ramp detail at Talbot or wherever it is. Yes. So I have a pointer here. This isn't going to show on video. But right here is shown the start of a backstop in the public right-of-way. And I agree with Preston that wherever possible, we should both push that backstop back out of whatever the width of the sidewalk is and round it so that somebody turning the corner will not trip. I actually took a fall this weekend myself because I rounded a corner and I was not on secure footing. I wasn't paying attention, and it was a right angle corner. If there is a case where you cannot achieve that, I'm not in favor of this raised piece starting in a place where somebody coming down or wheeling down in their wheelchair or scootering a kid, this is not a commercial area, it's perfectly legal to do so, could potentially get caught up on that curb as it rises. And I don't know how to do that other than taking the backstop out of out of the sidewalk area. We're creating a hazard if we create a backstop with that kind of angle in the sidewalk area.
We have not reached out to the property owner. We will do that. This might be a simple question and a simple solution.
Well, what do you expect will happen if they push back? Doesn't the city have the right to construct in that area?
We can certainly inform them of that right.
So the city doesn't intend to force the issue, is what you're saying?
Sorry, to come back to you, I would expect that issue will come back to this body, and I'm happy to communicate whatever we get back from the property owner.
I guess that's where we go. Yeah. This is like creating a turnaround for a garbage truck and fire engines. This is a community resource that the homeowner has encroached on and is preventing the city from creating a safe and effective travel way. I don't think I can say it politely much stronger than that. I think that's what I got. Thank you.
Just quickly, I completely agree and second Ken's comments both on the backstop and on the pie wedge. I do acknowledge, though, that the pie wedge was staff's response to having directional crosswalk ramps, and so that's why it's there. But I think it may cause more trouble and liability than the value of it. But it does lead us to, when we do develop standards on crosswalk ramps, that for a smaller radius crosswalk, or smaller radius intersection and corner, that we do have to point out what that detail looks like, because I don't think this is quite the design. But I understand the intent. That's all.
I also don't like the wedge, especially at night. Like, I could see myself tripping over the wedge. I could see my father-in-law tripping over the wedge. If there's something else that we could do, even at night, and just given the general lighting in the city, if we can find a alternative, especially if it's similar to what's at the middle school, because it just looks odd. It seems like it's a tripping hazard, and when I saw it, I was like, that seems weird. So That's the only comment that I have.
Would it be possible to have a small sloped rise
So I was thinking,
to solve the same backstopping the water issue?
Mm-hmm.
do you have enough?
So the
Something that was gradual and.
backside of it is like a flare. So instead of having vertical curb, you use a flare. It just doesn't come up to the full 6-inch height.
Right.
So at the back, it merges, into the ramps, but the front is still a vertical curb face in the flow line. But from there, it slopes down. And that's been done in some places, so that's a good alternative to having a vertical thing that's easier to trip over.
The height of it will depend on how much space you have, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Because if you're sloping it up the same way you would a typical curb ramp flare, it's not going to get much more than maybe 2-3 inches at best. It really depends on how much space you've got there.
So just for clarification, if the flare doesn't work, the design on Portland seems adequate?
Well, I think I understood Commissioner McCroskey's point, which I think is a good one. So the design on Portland did use sort of truncated pie wedges of the truncated dome mats,
right,
to get around that corner. And I think what Commissioner McCroskey is suggesting makes sense. So instead of doing that, you do the design you have here, which would keep the rows and the columns aligned with the crossing direction. And then where the pie wedge would either just be blank or would be the flared, the way Commissioner Jovendell is suggesting. So I think that is a better design than what is done there. So thank you both.
Any other comments?
Well, and I would add to that, just to be clear, that there would be two separate and adjacent partially implementations of domes so that you could face the domes the right direction.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if they could be separate. I mean, I imagine there's.
No, I'm not saying separate. I'm saying two pieces with their domes aligned in the correct direction for their location that might be adjacent at the back.
Right, that might touch. Yeah.
Right.
Right. Great. If you go back to the key route intersection. So the sidewalk crossings of the medians were also something that wasn't reviewed by this body. They just appeared. They're pretty annoying for a whole host of reasons. I mean, one, they sort of treat that, pedestrians or people meandering around without a destination rather than wanting to get places as much as motorists do. But besides that, I think they're only 4 feet wide, which given the curve makes them, more useless. They also, the visibility tends to be a continual problem because the city planted not just grass, but upstanding vegetation there. So it'd be great if those could get corrected as a part of this project and just take it out and make them straight and get rid of that vegetation and make it grass. I know, more expense, but it was a mistake in the first place the way they were done. And I would support putting in the mid-stop because, I bike through that intersection and it's just always confusing and chaotic. Who's going to do what, when, where? Given the distances, you don't know if the motorist on the far side is going to stop or decide they can go through. It's just bizarre. That said, I think the median at Brighton might be wider. I'm not sure because it's getting pretty close to where it turns to Ashbury. And so there may be a width issue there, but that's something you can check.
On that topic, I do bike up Portland and turn left on Key Route, and then at the end of the block, hang a right onto the Thousand Oaks every day. And during the school arrival period, it's surprisingly rational. I mean, I'm on a bike and I'm in the travel lane with cars, and there's pedestrians, and everyone has to wait. And the negotiation is like, okay, I got here first, but there's pedestrians in front of me, so the other guy's going to go. It's actually pretty comfortable. So I kind of like that. I worry a little bit that if we introduce controls in the middle of the intersection, at least at Portland, Washington's a little bit different again. I don't know it would help as much. It might complicate things more.
Are you transiting east-west?
I am traveling from the west headed east, so coming from San Pablo, up Portland, and then turning left to go north on Key Route in front of the high school.
Yeah. So I guess I feel this most acutely when I'm actually going north-south, especially when I'm trying to turn right. My attention is focused here on the right. An intersection and a half away on my left, somebody's trying to make a decision whether or not they're going to enter the intersection. And there are 3 entries. So this is actually a 6-entry intersection, which compounds the problem. So I have to not only be aware of the students who are in front of me, coming to be in front of me, coming to be next to me, and coming to be next to me from the other direction, I have to be aware of the other 2 access points to my left. This is not easy.
Yeah.
If we were all together in a 4-way stop at the same square, then I can make eye contact and I can negotiate and watch all of that because it's visible in my view screen. That's my point.
Yeah, and I actually find it more chaotic when it's sparse traffic, which is what the typical condition I go through. And because then it's not clear what the ordering is. When it's loaded up, it's like, okay, we each take turns.
Systematic then.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
I support the moving the bulb outs to Washington at Masonic, to the corners of Washington along the Greenway instead of along
Shorten the
Masonic.
Greenway crossing.
Thank you.
Do you have everything?
I think I got everything between Justin and I.
And just to clarify, part of the reason I asked for that clarification was if we bulbed out into Masonic, then vehicles turning right across the Albany Greenway crosswalk would have more of an offset, a better chance to align their vehicles to see bikes or pedestrians in the crosswalk before they get to the crosswalk. It's not urgent, but just, and it's, if it were a 20-foot bulb out, that would be a significant change. At 5 feet, it's pretty minimal, maybe not worth the expense unless we have other strong reasons for it. So I do agree with the recommendation that has been made to shorten the crossing of the Albany Greenway across Washington.
And it might be that a way that's more cost-effective to do that is rather than change the drainage line, although maybe that's not that costly there, particularly where Spokane comes in, is to do an island instead in the street with the drainage going in between. And eventually that could become a green feature, maybe not as part of this project, but if there is a lot of drainage coming to that point, then that would be an ideal spot to be putting in a green infrastructure.
So what we're looking at is east of this area, oh, sorry. Back to Masonic. Where am I going? East of this area, along the Greenway on the south side of Washington, there's enough real estate for some green infrastructure. And that's generally where we see a little bit more of the drainage because there's a full block on the south side. On the north side, there's Spokane that takes away some of the drainage patterns. So you're not going to get as much flow into a green infrastructure on the north side as you would on the south.
And so the flow on Spokane is away from Washington on the west side?
I believe it is pretty flat there, but I believe it is away from
Okay. So the bulb out on the south side could be where you put your green infrastructure and or the island, however you want to treat it. So it's your serve dual purpose there.
Yeah, we'll look at that. We were planning on putting it behind the sidewalk along the Greenway.
Right, and I think if you actually put it on the street side, it might be easier in terms of maintenance, because if you put it behind the sidewalk, then you've got an under drain, and those things tend to be a a pain in terms of clogging and whatnot. I mean, maybe the design works now, but that's why we're going to valley gutters everywhere else, is because these under drains after decades collapse, otherwise become a big problem. So I think getting rid of an under drain and just putting the green infrastructure where the drainage is now and using the real estate that you have would eliminate that.
I do need to see what real estate I have, because I think there's already some storm drain infrastructure underground in that area. So I need to see where that aligns.
Right, so where you would tap into that. But you essentially have a whole parking width there to work with. So you've got 7 feet of width potentially that you could, and the width of the greenway, which is, I don't know what it is, 60 feet. I mean, that's probably a larger area than you need for green infrastructure to handle that particular amount of runoff.
Anything else?
Just, sorry. One thing I just wanted to point out, I was looking at the Key Route Brighton intersection, and so that's a T intersection. So the number of movements that would stop twice I think it's only one direction. Whereas at the other intersections, you'd have lots of them. And I don't know if that was considered when thinking about the additional stop sign at Brighton and Key Route. So.
Yeah, it's too bad you couldn't make them a yield sign for when things were thick, but then people
Right.
wouldn't know how to interpret that.
Yeah,
So it's, yeah, that'd be too difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was good.
Okay. So
What Thousand Oaks is it?
we'll move on to item 5-4, for real this time. Expenditure of sugar-sweetened beverage tax.
I know you brought it up like last.
Somebody has a presentation? Yep. Or did we just
No,
discuss?
no.
No presentation.
No presentation. This is pretty simple and straightforward. In November of 2016, Albany voters approved Measure 01, which the sugar-sweetened beverage tax, better known as the soda tax. And as part of that measure, the Traffic and Safety Commission was one of several commissions that is to review annually the priorities for expenditures of those funds. Last year, you prioritized crossing guards in the Safe Routes to Schools program, and as part of the packet of material you have, you saw the final decision by the City Council. And, sorry, I just shut my computer down inadvertently.
We have we have received 2 comments from the public on this as well.
Yes, you received 2 emails that are part of your packet, and then at the dais at 6:45 or something this evening, an email came in from the principal of Marin School, all speaking in support of the crossing guard program. And roughly the estimated revenue for this coming year is about $250,000.
Which I'm always surprised at. It just seems like
It
so
seems
much
like a
for
lot of soda, but
People
Yeah, every
so
ounce.
still, huh?
That's a lot of ounces.
Is that just that's not restaurant? There's no sugar tax at restaurants, is there? Or it's just the stores?
I think it's just
Like
Safeway,
Safeway
Bevmo,
and
Sprouts,
CVS, okay.
liquor stores.
Yeah, so it's 250 million ounces.
So thirsty.
Yeah, now I'm thirsty. Is that a reduction? It looks like 305 was on the last year's allocation.
I believe there was some funds that were carried over because the initial revenues were greater than what was expected. So I think we're now kind of getting into the annual cycle, the normal annual cycle at about 250,000.
Okay. So, Commissioner, comments, questions?
I've got one comment just to kind of start us off. The recommendations last time were largely programmatic. So unless there's a program we don't like anymore, I kind of feel like we ought to stick with it. And the crossing guard program is a perfect example of that. It feels like the water bottle filling stations is the only sort of capital piece. And unless there's more locations around the city that we're thinking, oh, we'd love to do it there, and there as well, maybe that 90,000 is, what's available to play with, or, the numbers might change, but the idea being that the one-time expenditure doesn't continue, that could either get added to a program or become another one-time expenditure. Otherwise, I like everything else that's there programmatically.
So for staff, do you know if the water bottle filling stations, have those kind of rolled out to all the locations now that the city desires, or?
I know they are rolling out. I don't know if they've gone into all the locations, but they're definitely being installed. There's one here in City Hall.
Well, okay, yeah, maybe reframe that. Is this $90,000 going to cover?
Yes.
Basically, they're all funded.
Yes. The 90,000 funded the stations that
are desired.
Yeah.
Okay, so it really is.
I actually sat next to a Park and Rec commissioner tonight at dinner, and he said that they're considering additional locations, and perhaps fewer but more costly locations that might involve getting the water to the location. So that they're actively considering that. They've had one meeting, and they're going to have another soon.
Well, I mean, for my part, I'm for the crossing guard program, and the Safe Route to School program might be good to add parenthetically there so people know what that is. That's bicycling training, is my understanding.
Yep. Elementary school.
Yeah. So I certainly, bike safety program. So I certainly support that. In terms of the small capital slice part of this, I was thinking it might be useful to use some funding to support this commission's previous recommendation to put a bulb out on the southwest corner of Talbot and Marin. And so part of that was going to be funded by that CIP was $65,000 for 3 rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and we approved 2. And so that would presumably pay for part of the bulb out. I don't know if there's an unfunded part, but that this potentially could fund that. And I think to the extent that that makes walking around safer for students getting to Cornell Elementary, has a good nexus, health nexus. Beyond that, something else we've talked about, we haven't approved, but it is in the ATP as a signal, is to put in an RRFB to the east of Peralta in that long stretch of Marin that doesn't have any safe, signal protected crossings. So we got some public input about that a while ago, and it seemed like, well, it's in our ATP. So, we plan to do something. And if those are really only $15,000 or whatever, then this potentially could fund that. So I think that would be the ordering that I would put forward for discussion is crossing guards, bike safety program, elementary school, finishing the funding on that bulb out if it needs more funding, and our RRFB on a crossing east of Peralta somewhere. And I think it's also worth noting, so we got public input, which is great, on support for the crossing guard program. The input from the Marin Elementary School principal actually was not, in fact, support for crossing guard. If I understand what she's asking for, she's actually asking for the city to fund a staff position to do loading zone enforcement. So I just want to recognize that's what I think she's asking for.
I actually talked to her.
Okay, because
she definitely supports the crossing guard.
Okay, fair, yeah.
But there was an accident at the school yesterday. I actually saw the aftermath, and a sign was down, and a mom sitting on the sidewalk, and it does get a little hairy. And she thought having somebody there to sort of facilitate, and I'm sure it's not just Marin, it's every school in the United States, but if there is, if money could go towards helping, I think it's just helping that morning, dropping off, having that, because, I've watched you get people parking there and leaving their car under the signs that say, don't leave your car, and then you have, other people double parking, and their kid gets out into the middle of the street to get into school. So it is sort of a mess along that stretch. So if I were to interpret her letter, she definitely supports the crossing guard program, and I think she also supports if the city has funds to hire somebody to facilitate morning drop-off.
Based on my experience finding out about the incremental cost of adding a crossing guard, if, for example, you were to hire the same firm that hires the crossing guards, it would be approximately $22,500 a year to add a person. And it's also in front of a school, which is not usually where the city deploys staff.
And Berkeley does this with a volunteer program. So I think Sylvia Mendez has a, I think it's parent volunteer, and they do this very efficient drop-off with some cones that the parents set up. And the cars come in, they make sure the kids safely get to the entrance of the school, and then they remove the cones. So it seems like something we can explore instead of hiring staff.
At the very least, you might start with parent volunteers on the curb.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Monitoring the situation.
I think there have been parent volunteers,
Yeah?
and they
Oh,
were
good.
disregarded by people parking there. So.
Get them some vests.
For $15, you can get the electronic whistle. It's rather shrill. Usually come with several different tones. And when I was at Marin doing the monitoring, the orange vest helped. But that's neither here nor there. So if I can segue, were you talking? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
What did I have?
You're talking about Berkeley.
No. I had a question about
Please.
the crossing guards, but you can go ahead.
Why don't you finish?
Okay.
You haven't gone first today.
Thank you. The crossing guard program, so for EZ, it is a program, and so it's an ongoing thing that we have to fund. It seems like we are now dependent upon the beverage tax to fund the crossing guard program. Is that it? Are we not, there's no other activity of looking for other funding sources, and we're just dependent upon the beverage tax now to fund that into perpetuity?
I believe that's correct. If for some reason the soda tax revenue started to fall to below what looks to be today $130,000 a year, I'm sure there would be a lot of conversation about what other sources of funds the city would, and hopefully maybe the school district or the university would also participate as they used to. But,
Yeah.
But for the time being, yeah, I think the first priority has been to use soda tax revenues.
Okay. I like how you got that in there, Jeff.
I was going to point it out too, but you did it. That's all.
Great. Well, I certainly support the ongoing crossing guard programs and the Safe Routes to School training program. I could say a lot about the Safe Routes to School training program, but just topically, there are a lot of kids moving across the city these days to get to their schools with the Ocean View closed down. That's also going to happen at Marin. Even if they're not elementary school kids, their families might be grappling with a new site, and their ability to, say, bike to the middle school or the high school can help alleviate that situation. Traditionally, for the last 10 years or so, I think now, we've done all elementary students either in 4th or 5th grade, which has been great. Interestingly, Marin School has opted out of most of the Safe Routes to School program, and I believe that includes the bike education program. So I haven't yet had a chance to make contact with the principal, but I intend to. We'd certainly love for them to prepare for their turn with moving sites. So I'd love to talk with you about that later.
Yes.
So having said that, I would love for the city council to find permanent funding. I think these programs are certainly long-standing and deserve to be funded. So I'm certainly okay with them being funded from the soda tax, but I would throw the challenge out to the city council to fund these programs in an ongoing manner without relying on a fluctuating income. I would also support the use of capital portions of the funds to accomplish additional safety measures on the ground, as Commissioner Jordan mentioned. Names, sorry. And I'm going to leave it at that.
I'm also a big fan of the Crossing Guard program and the Safe Routes to School. My older son did the program, and I thought it was great. One thing that I was thinking of that I know we talked about at a commission meeting, bike parking at the high school. And I walked by and noticed that it's a mess. And I don't know if any of these funds could be used towards, or if they even have space at the high school, I don't know, for bike racks, like purchase bike racks and install for the high school. But it looked like I didn't go in into the interior of the campus, but I have seen signs like don't attach your bike to the rails, and all the bike parking by the aquatic center was all full, and I rounded the corner and it looked like everything within the campus was pretty full. So I was thinking, and I don't know if the high school wants additional bike racks, but I mean, I think that would be something that would be good to do if they would want money for that. So those are my comments.
I can't argue with that.
I like that idea. I mean, especially with the elementary school being there for the next few years, there's going to be more demand.
Personally, I would prioritize that after the other two. I understand there may be some other funding sources for bike racks at the high school, which is a project I'm working on. That's not to say that money from the soda tax wouldn't be welcome.
So does staff need I think we've all, do you need an order?
So what the outcome of this will be a brief memo to the city council that kind of captures your discussion. If you, what I'm taking away from it is the Crossing Guard program, Safe Routes to Schools, and then I'm not sure where you're prioritizing the capital improvements such as the bulb outs and RFB in relation to the bike racks that you just started to talk about.
Maybe the bike racks we'll make the bike racks fifth.
Bulb out, beacon, bike rack.
Bulb out, beacon, bike rack.
Yeah.
Got it.
Agreed.
Seems like we want to provide a recommendation, so I would say that we make a motion for this.
Yep.
Oh. Why did I say that?
Second that.
Why did I say that? Let's see. I make a motion that we recommend to City Council a list of priority programs and projects for the beverage tax in the order of, what's first?
Crossing Guard.
Crossing Guard program, Safe Routes to School program, the bulb out, the rapid flashing beacon bulb out at Talbot and Marin, rapid flashing beacon at Peralta and Marin, and then additional bike racks at Albany High School.
Okay, with just one amendment. So it would be east of Peralta and Marin. At Summit, the RFB would be,
yes,
east
approaching.
somewhere. Yeah.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Opposed?
I'm sorry, aye. I was thinking of east of Pearl.
I guess the recommendation approved. Carries. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. It's like I never know what to do at the end. It's like I feel like I should talk more, but no. Okay, so.
Yeah.
Nobody
If something
needs to-
comes up that we didn't
Right.
address.
It's like, isn't there a little celebration at the end of the item, or?
Okay, moving on to item 6-1, California State Transportation Agency Zero Traffic Fatalities Task Force Report of Findings.
Yeah, so we listed this as an announcement item. I can go into a little bit of detail on it if that's of interest to the commission. So there was a statewide effort following state legislation AB 2363 that was to look at policies and regulations impacting some of the Vision Zero efforts around the state. The task force worked through the end of this past year and issued its report at the end of January, or beginning of January, I think was when it was supposed to be released. It focused on some of the key things that have been identified as roadblocks to some efforts around the state, primarily issues relating to how we set speed limits and some of the regulations on enforcing speed limits that have led to triggering raising speed limits when you've been trying to improve safety, using the 85th percentile metric, and the state rules give you pretty fixed parameters over what you do from that base. So in response to that, this was putting together literature review and some recommendations on what next steps should be for the state to consider how might change the regulations. The other components that were really delved into on this was when we can lower speed limits. So one was how we set that initial threshold. Another is what criteria we give ourselves or local jurisdictions to move or adjust from that, and in what situations that's permitted, what discretion we have. And then the other main one that they went into in pretty good detail was on automated enforcement and the effectiveness of that, why the state hasn't allowed that, and how it might go about reassessing that. So those were the main, went into greater detail on sort of a wider range of engineering, enforcement, education, but those were the main things that it was really diving into.
Questions? Comments?
So while I appreciate well, first of all, thank you very much for providing us those resources. And I think while I appreciate the movement, it may not be as meaningful in Albany because as an older city, all our speed limits except for San Pablo are 25 miles per hour already. Now, of course, we could go lower than that, but I think the challenge at this point is more.
But we can't.
Well, under this paradigm change,
Right.
But I think the challenge is more not what speed limit we set, but actually getting motorists to drive that speed limit. So I don't really see that the constraints around changing the speed limit are the real constraint that we have now. And this takes me back to a suggestion I made, which was that we might over time ratchet down our 85th percentile requirement to get traffic calming bit by bit. And Commissioner Jovendell rightly brought up, well, the reason it's 30 is, and I think staff also is, is resource limitation. A natural way to prioritize, though, is if we did lower it. Well, first of all, I guess the question is, how many blocks are there that have qualified for hardscape that haven't been installed yet? I don't know if you have an approximate number off the top of your head.
We may be getting a little beyond announcements, but
okay, fair enough.
But we can agendize the policy discussion on the traffic.
Okay, well, fair enough. I mean, I think my point is, I think we're in our community, given its age, its street layout, unlike newer cities in South County and East County, I think our challenge more is getting people to drive the speed limit. And I think we need engineering measures to do that before we really, we can change the speed sign, but that's not going to change how fast people drive.
I will just second that because, as I probably mentioned before, Berkeley used the newer state law to reduce the school zone speed limits from 25 to 15. Our before and after study showed no significant change in behavior. So it is down to getting people to actually obey the speed limits, not just setting lower speed limits.
In that vein, one of my announcements is a thank you to the city and APD specifically for turning out at the opening of both of the Ocean View remote locations to help mitigate the confusion and the speeding or misbehavior of parents. I understand they're a bit understaffed, and which speaks to the other comment, but they got out there, and we appreciate that. I also happen to notice that they're now making radar speed signs in a trunk transportable, mountable on existing pole version. So it's a rechargeable unit. You can set them to just be informative, or you can also set them to gather data. So I want to add that to our toolbox as we think about ways to ameliorate issues that we see.
So, so it goes on a temporary pole, you said?
Yeah, there's some, anti-theft locking screwing device that puts it on a pole, and then you aim it, and tighten it
Okay.
up, and then it sits there for however long it's charged. And
Yeah, if you got a parking sign, you could mount it on the same
So
pole.
it's a pre-existing pole?
Yeah, use a
okay,
pre-existing
okay.
pole. You can
Yeah.
mount it on any pole.
they're under $5,000 to start, and it fits in a trunk.
Huh.
And I'm teaching a bike locking class a week from tonight at the Albany Y Extension on Solano from 7 to 8. Bike locking, yeah. It's just an hour.
I have one quick announcement. The ordinance that would officially change this commission from traffic and safety to transportation is going back to the council on Monday night. They looked at it back in the fall and had some comments, so we made some changes to it. And essentially their comments were they questioned the appeal process that had been built into the ordinance. And so we just took that out. And if at some point in the future we need to revisit that, we can add it in. But everything else remains the same.
What are we on? Are we on? Are we still on? Do we move on?
Announcements.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We're on 6.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess regarding announcements, I saw there's I think a pavement management presentation to council on Monday night.
Yeah.
Okay. I just was wondering if it's sort of the same thing
I'm
that
sorry, what was it?
pavement management.
Oh, okay.
The slides weren't posted. There were no attachments when I looked. But I was just sort of curious if that was similar to what we got, but I guess that's public works, so. And they're gone.
The wording led me to believe it was similar to what we got, but I have no confirmation of that.
I didn't know if there'd be any utility to any representative from this body being there or not, but I guess we won't know.
It's telecast. It's recorded. But you're saying, was a member of this body invited? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm saying I wonder if there was be any utility to a member of this body being there, because I don't know if there's changes that are being presented that came from this body, and therefore council might have questions as to, like we changed some of the street classifications and things like that. And so I have no idea what's in there because there's no attachments.
Are there other announcements? Okay, so we'll move on to future agenda items. We did have public comment on the Washington and Carmel crosswalks, so I don't know if that's something that needs to come back to us or needs to update to the commenters or
The
status report of.
Yeah, the design recommendation from this body is already in place. It's just a matter of the
Oh, it's the timing of
delivery
when it's gonna
timeline
happen.
that they keep asking. Yeah.
Do we have a sense of it? We don't have any sense of the timing? They'll be back.
My recollection,
I know them.
the exchange was a little while ago. My recollection was that we said when we're doing work in that, adjacent to that intersection, we plan to fold that in, but that we don't plan to do a standalone.
So are there any plans at this point to?
It's not in the 2-year street segment that we've identified.
If you could respond to them and let them know, because they will come back.
They're going to buttonhole you at school? Is that
Well,
what
I
you're
know
saying?
them, yeah.
The issue, just so everybody's aware, the issue is that in order to put in paint the crosswalk, we need a curb ramp. In order to do the curb ramp, we need to move the storm drain. So it's a bigger project.
Oh, you need to move the storm, okay.
There's a storm drain inlet right where the crosswalk would land at the southeast corner.
And I'm assuming there's no plans for any work. I know we're doing a section of Washington, but not, we've already.
What you saw tonight doesn't go all the way to Carmel.
Yeah, and there's no plan, I guess, because that section of Washington's already been.
So it's a little bit bigger project. It would be in the capital improvement program budget that Robert and Mark are working on, and will
Okay.
be coming to committees and commissions and city council later this spring and summer.
Okay.
It's too bad that it's that involved.
Well, if
I
they
will say-
understand that there's a storm drain,
It is, we talked about it at the time. We tried to be really clear about it, that was, the painting of the crosswalk was a bigger deal than people might have realized,
okay.
unfortunately.
On a, I guess I wouldn't say a positive note, but that section of Washington, the pavement seems to be degrading quite quickly. So it's,
Maybe sooner.
so it may be sooner rather than later.
Okay.
But that's just a vague, yeah.
Okay. So any other future agenda?
There have been a number of cities that have passed resolutions in favor of a transit-only lane on the Bay Bridge, and also transit agencies. And I don't know if that's something that this commission wants to take up, to have a resolution get to council, or if I should just do it as a private citizen and approach a council member or mayor.
I mean, I would think it would be relevant to this body, because I know a lot of people use the Transway bus from Albany.
Yep.
And we just built that park and ride lot
That's right.
to actually enhance that even more. Well, yeah, I guess it wasn't Albany actually that built it. It was, yeah, I don't know who it was. Alameda CTC or whatever, MTC.
Sorry, I got to call that one.
Yeah, fair enough.
So anyways, yeah, I think that would be a quick agenda, a future agenda item that we can, and I'd be happy to work on with staff.
We have the 1,000 block of Masonic traffic coming. I expect that to come this coming month. And as Robert mentioned, Washington Avenue construction should be coming back when we have the full plan set. And in the next few months, we'll be bringing 2020 active transportation program project to recommend to council. It's the next grant cycle.
Oh, so that's for a
Grant application.
Okay, I was going to say, wait, what? You got money?
Okay, so the next meeting is Thursday, March 26, 2020. And I guess with that, we adjourn.
Nicely done.
Congratulations.
Seriously.